Welcome everyone. You're at Fostering Rural Connections. We'll get started shortly. I'm gonna ask that if you're not an interpreter or myself, that you please turn your camera off for now. Alrighty. Hello and welcome. I am Brittany Zasweta. I am an April board member and the facilitator for our workshop today. Thank you for joining us for Fostering Rural Connections. Before we get started, I do want to mention a few housekeeping items. The first one is you're going to want to scroll over the screen to find menu bar pop-ups. Depending on what you're using, whether that's a computer, tablet, phone, you can find the menu bar at either the top or the bottom of your screen. In that menu bar is also where you will find closed captioning for today's session. You can view captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, the interpreter should be on screen. And we do have slides shown. So if you'd like to change the size of the screen for the slides or the interpreter, you can select the line in the middle to make the screen either larger or smaller. If you happen to have any technical issues, please use the chat feature for assistance. There should be what looks like a word bubble in that same menu bar. And if you'd like to turn the chat feature off, you can do this by pressing Alt plus the letter H. There will be Q&A opportunities during this presentation, so please pay attention to the Q&A box on the menu bar for those times. Only put questions there, otherwise they might get lost in the chat. You can also ask a question or make a comment by selecting the hand raise option in the menu bar. That will let us know you have a question. And for those of you on the phone or using keystrokes, you can press *9 or Alt plus the letter Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will let you know when you can unmute, and you can unmute by pressing Alt plus the letter A if you happen to be using keystrokes. And just a reminder, if you do join into our conversation, please do your best to keep the background noise down as much as possible so that we can hear you clearly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our presenters, Rita. Rina, you are on mute.
Been doing this for years now. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm in Missoula, Montana, so it is 11:30. So thank you for coming to our session on fostering rural connections, and we'll introduce ourselves in a minute, but I just wanted to note that on this introductory slide, there are 4 logos connected to our presentation. The first is a maroon and gray logo for the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities at the University of Montana, and the Research and Training Center on Disability in Rural Communities, or the RTC Rural. The second logo is for the Northwest Georgia Center for Independent Living in blue and green with a subtitle of Empowering People Who Have Disabilities. The third logo is the Able South Carolina logo in gray and white. And the final logo, which will be on each of the content slides, is the Rural Community Living Development logo with a green and purple house with yellow and purple and red stick people between the houses, and the Rural Community Living Development text in green and red, yellow, and purple. Great. So first we're going to introduce ourselves. Christina.
Thank you, Raina. My name is Christina Holtzclaw. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Georgia Center for Independent Living. My pronouns are she and hers. I am a white woman. I have blonde hair. I'm in my basement office, and behind me is my Raggedy Ann and Andy collection, and I have a lamp behind me. And thank you for having me today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dory Tempio, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm with Able, South Carolina. I am the Director of Community Outreach and Consumer Rights, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am a white woman with red short hair. I have a black and white striped dress on with black leggings and black boots, and I have blue eyes, and I am also a proud individual with both a developmental disability and a physical disability, and we are excited to be with you today.
Thanks. And I am Raina Sage, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a researcher at the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities, and I'm wearing a blue dress today with a fuchsia sash, which is not on the screen. And behind me in my home office are my books on a bookshelf in the order of the rainbow by color. Oh, and I forgot, we are going to be doing, so I got so caught up in my what I'm wearing. Because this is like a before lunch, after lunch thing where people might be kind of tired, we're going to be doing a fun activity related to rural movies and TV shows. So throughout the presentation, there will be images from various movies and TV shows that are set in rural places. For example, on this slide, there is a group of 8 individuals of various ages, races, and genders standing in a harvested field. And what we are going to ask you to do is to guess what movie or TV show this is, and then you can drop that in the chat, and then at the end we'll reveal the answer. So we'll be doing that throughout the presentation. Dory.
Good afternoon. So we thought if we're talking about outreach, it's important to connect outreach with rural communities. So we would like, this is the part we would like you all to either respond in the chat box or unmute yourselves. So the first question we want to know from all of you, why are rural communities traditionally underserved? Why are rural communities traditionally underserved? Feel free to put your response in the chat box or unmute yourselves. Love it. Lack of services due to population or poverty. Thank you, Alyssa. Who else has some answers? Transportation. Thanks, April. Who else has one? Jake says less focused population. Who else would like to add? Oh, Chuck says transportation to existing services. I'm giving it just another minute or two in case people want to respond using their mic or are still trying to type in the chat box. It's spread out. Thank you, Sandy. Garrett says funding. Lily says under-resourced and unsupported by federal and state programs. All great answers. And April also added, traditionally neighbors take care of neighbors in rural communities. All answers that are definitely applicable. I see some more people just added less funding. Denise says distance to reach consumers from centers for independent living, internet access, phone service can be spotty, outreach can be harder. transportation, family and friends help each other or they go without because they're not aware of services. Amanda says people don't even know services exist. Jill added in, rural poverty has to be addressed differently from the metropolitan poverty. And Kathy added in rural communities, they may not trust outsiders or people that they view from the big city or another area that isn't in their home community. Great answers. And Raina, did you want to describe the picture?
Yeah, yes. So this is a picture of an image that includes two young Native American men standing in front of a wooden building. Dory, did you want me to do this one?
Nope, just my hands with my disabilities. They didn't click the whole way. So thinking about why centers for independent living are so important and why we are able to add such a great component to rural communities, and thinking about some of the barriers that you all provided to what makes outreach maybe more difficult in serving rural communities. We want to know, though, from you, what makes centers for independent living so unique in being able to do outreach? We'd like to hear your input. What makes centers for independent living unique in being able to do community outreach? We'd love to hear your responses. Feel free to mute, feel free to chat. Jake says we're able to advertise anywhere, community boards, schools, hospitals, etc. Amanda said they may not trust non-Indigenous people. No problem. What else, everybody? What would make us as Centers for Independent Living unique in being able to do outreach in rural communities? What makes us stand out maybe from other groups that might make us unique in being able to do so? April says more flexible. Great. What else? And if anybody wants to unmute, feel free. We'd love to hear from you. Samantha says people with disabilities are the providers. Woohoo! Great answer. Anyone else? I'm just giving it a minute or two in case the chat is catching up with the typing.
Remember, if you want to unmute, you can press *9 or you can press the hand raise option.
Amanda shared, we have disabilities and might be able to relate differently to the people in the community. Great. Well, I will see if anything comes up, but we'll move to the next slide. And if anyone else shares, I will add it. Kurt just put in there just being local and having that connection with the people. Terrific, friends. Well, diversity from James, thinking about what you all have said and the answers to the first two questions is really what went into us developing the rural community living development peer mentoring model for Centers for Independent Living and staff that work there. Not only was the premise that it be peer-to-peer, just like Centers for Independent Living were founded on a peer-to-peer basis. Well, so is this mentor program. It is based on the peer-to-peer model and looking at how we can partner as SIL staff who are skilled in rural community outreach with Centers for Independent Living staff interested in developing and practicing these skills. Each of our Centers for Independent Living have people on staff that know people who are connected within our communities. But how do we help those that work on our staff that may not have those connections? How can we mentor each other so that we all build strong community connections and we are all able to reach rural communities in a way that they feel connected to our services as well? And this is a a film with both a woman with blonde short hair who is white and a gentleman who is tall with curly brown hair, and he's wearing a blue shirt and he has whiskers and part of the start of a beard. And we will go to the next slide. So we're all about hearing from you, and we like interaction on our team. That's probably why we all work so well together. So we want to know from your past experience with community outreach and outreaching to rural communities in your area, what are some methods you all have used so far? Can you all tell us a method you have used to do rural community outreach? James says they've used social media. Woohoo! What else do we have? Tell us some of the other things other centers for independent living are doing and utilizing. I love it. Transition classes with high school students, partnering with church group in rural areas, social media, email, newsletters, social media, newspaper and radio stations, tables at flea markets. I'm giving it a minute to see if anyone else thinks of anything else they want to add, or unmute yourself and share. Participating in community boards across entire service areas. Talking to your neighbors. Calling trees. That's like where you call different groups and they call somebody else so that you all stay interconnected. Satellite offices in these areas. These are great answers. And it's nice when we all have opportunities to share strategies that we're utilizing, much like this program, because when we support each other and we mentor each other, we can only make outreach better for everyone in rural areas. Hold various community events. Yes. I'm giving it one more minute and then we'll switch the slide. In case anybody else wanted to add anything. All right, let's go to the next slide. And if anything pops up in the chat box, I will share it. So thinking about all that we've done, we wanted to talk with you all about the pilot curriculum. It's really important that you have a point to start at. No matter where we serve, no matter what state we live in, no matter what communities we serve, we all have to have a starting point. So one of the things we started working on, number one, is how do we put together rural outreach and networking strategies that everyone can utilize? So we looked at some fun interactive activities, and I'm going to share a little bit of one with you, and we provided the handout that is in our presentation material. So if any of you want to utilize them, you can. We did an activity that we put together. It's called Know Before You Go. And it was an activity that helps you to do research about the rural area you want to connect with or you want to connect in, because it's really vital that we know the community we're outreaching to, because if some strategies will work, there are certain individuals who may need various accommodations. There are individuals of different marginalized communities, and we need to know that before we go in. We need to know the community leaders. We need to know the community organizations or stores or businesses that stand out that people frequent. So this activity that we put together helps you to look at who lives there, what kinds of jobs are there. And the information handout has information on using online data to explore the disability rates as well as other factors impacting people with disabilities in your rural communities that you serve. Another thing we decided was we all have to look at our centers for independent living and look at where we are. Are we ready to just jump into a rural community and just start doing outreach, or do we need to do some preparation before we go? So here are some questions we put together that's part of an activity on cell readiness in order to help you support your rural outreach and networking efforts. Number one question: do your executive director and other supervisors value increasing the reach of your services into rural areas? We all have to be on the same page before we're out connecting with the community. Then you want to look at what connections do you and your CIL and people at your CIL already have. Are you a part of community groups that are already established? I heard some of you mentioning sitting on boards, councils, and committees. That's a great opportunity. Do you have someone on staff that lives in that community or grew up there or has a connection to that community? That really makes a difference. Do you have staff who share peer characteristics of members in the community you are targeting, such as identifying Black and Indigenous people of color or BIPOC, Hispanic and Latinx, or age groups or shared experiences? Do you have people with diverse experiences, such as experiencing homelessness, violence, or other trauma? Do we have individuals of the LGBTQIA+ community that are in these communities? Before we embark, we need to know what we have already that we can utilize to find success and connect with the individuals that live there. Another activity we suggested was having a meeting or a coffee with a connected person or connected leaders in that community. It really does make a difference because then they're able to bring people together for you. And then the movie image on this slide is of two men, one with a developmental disability, sitting in a forest. And I am really pleased and passionate that I get to work with both Raina and my colleague, Christina, who's gonna take over from here.
Thank you, Dory. The next slide is getting people involved. And I think everybody at one time has had an event where they only had a few or maybe nobody show. I know we've had a couple of those. And this is about building community development teams. And if Dory and Raina could watch the chat for me, I'm blind. So if anybody wants to jump in and just talk, that would be perfect. So one of
Watch it for you, Christina.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. I appreciate it. One of the examples is the SEAL staff skills and strengths and experiences. And, if somebody wants to, talk about some of their SEAL staff experiences, I know we have a great staff. We have staff who've never met a stranger. We have people who are on our staff, they know all about assistive technology. So there's all kinds of skills that can be brought into outreach. One of the activities is to assess who is in your own organization and should get involved. And if you think about the staff at your CIL, and sometimes you can learn some new things just by talking in your staff meetings. I know we have. Let me get to I'm going to read some notes in Braille. What are the skills and experiences at the work in your CIL? Because you also have staff do an activity that lists their strengths and skills. We could probably have an encyclopedia if somebody was to do that. One team activity, I thought this would be a fun one, is to have a group make a list of positive aspects of the community and the activity, because you have to know the community that you're going into. And I have had times when we first started our center, we did go kind of, I guess you'd say, do cold calls where we go into a community and not necessarily know what was in it. And each, community, if you've seen one rural community, that's all you've ever seen, because each rural community is different. So if you can highlight the positive aspects of the community and have your community-based teams brainstorm about positive aspects, because when you go into some communities, and I know I've worked at the CIL for 17 years, sometimes you go in and you say, well, they don't have much transportation, or they don't have much employment. But there's a lot of positive aspects, and you never know if the people who live in that community have the way that they've lived and they've been there for their whole lives. And so you have to kind of see what they think of their community, hear their voices. And one of the things we did to bring our communities together, we are doing spotlights. The spotlights, well, we've done two, but we spotlighted Whitfield County, and we talked about our SIL, but we mostly listened at what they had to say. And sometimes we were surprised because it wasn't all about housing or transportation like we actually thought it might be. Let me get to my next notes. Just a second. There is one activity that I thought would be fun. Is one person is the interviewer and the other one tells a story. And it may be a person who has a disability or knows somebody in that community who has a disability. And the other person asks the questions to learn as much as possible about the resources of that community. And the other person tells what they use in certain situations, whether it be transportation or whatnot. And they usually do this for like 5 to 7 minutes. And then you flip that around and they can reverse it. And certain staff may know more about, we have certain staff that know more about other counties or different counties. And when we know that a staff has connections in that county or they live in that county, we go to them to find out what direction to go into. For our spotlight, we actually had all of the staff go because we did a presentation about the center, and then we had them talk to us about, and that's what we did with the next spotlight. Our goal is to have spotlights in all 15 counties, which may take us about 1.5 years, but we'll do it. Is there anything in the chat?
There's one hand up. I can go ahead and Mary, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hey, Mary.
I think it's V. Emery, possibly V. Emery.
Hello.
Go ahead,
Sorry
you're
about that. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, hello. There you are.
No, I'm fine. I think something fell on my keyboard. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good talking with you. Okay, well, if that's all, then we'll go to the next. Oh, okay.
There's another hand up, Grace T.
Hey, Grace.
Hi, this is Grace from Able, South Carolina. I've been thinking about, it can be hard to reach rural areas because of the lack of internet, and especially with COVID. And I was just going to see if you had any suggestions about how to sort of reach more people in areas that might not have access to social media and things like that. I used to leave like flyers for our programs in the library. But the thing about that is now, like, the library is only allowing a certain number of people in at a time, so that might not be as effective.
Yeah, well, one thing we do, because there are people in our service area that has, like you said, little access to social media. We also go on the radio stations and we talk about our services that way. And we're going to be doing podcasts that's going to be coming up in probably about a month. But I think radio stations, that's been very helpful, especially in some of our smaller counties. And then the spotlights, of course, you have to kind of watch what's happening with COVID, as you said. But like the spotlight we had in Whitfield, we were very fortunate. We got a very large room. It was social distance. We had hand sanitizer at the door, and we could wear masks. And so that's one. That's kind of hit or miss because you may have to go to Zoom if, of course, the people doesn't have social media. But like I said, I think just working with radio has helped a lot. Getting on the radio shows and talking about services, and of course we've always, the good old fashioned just picking up the phone and calling people has always been a hit with us. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christina. So yeah, Grace, great question. And that's, when we got together and a team of 7, Dory and Christina were part of the team to build this curriculum, and we built it over the course of about 6 months. And to answer some of those questions, because just like you said, for all the reasons that you've talked about, how hard it is sometimes to reach people in your rural service areas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about working together. So another session in the curriculum is about cultivating curiosity to establish healthy group dynamics. So this is, you've gotten a group of people together in your rural community that includes some of your CIL staff, as well as others in your rural service area. And these are just some fun activities that you might want to use. So the first one is an example of a conversation cafe. And it's an activity to help create safe spaces. And takes about an hour, and after you establish group agreements about judgment and trust, openness, honesty, a small group of people will cycle through these 4 short rounds of briefly talking about a topic and then going into a more in-depth conversation about it. So you get to hear from everyone. A second activity is a 1, 2, 4 all. If you have a bigger group, say you hold a town hall in your rural, or a spotlight like Christina was talking about, you might want to do an activity like this. It's quick, you can increase, and it increases the likelihood that the group hears from everyone. And so participants first think on their own about a topic, and then, like you might throw out a question, what is a challenge for people with disabilities in this community? And they think about it, and then they talk with one other person. So they pair up, and then those pairs come together in a group of 4, and then you can have a share out. So everybody gets a chance to talk. And then the last activity that our team developed and thought was important for thinking about group dynamics was an activity called Yes and this helps acknowledge disagreements. Conflict can be caused by separate competing sets of ideas in these kinds of settings. You can't solve everything, and we don't always agree on how to solve issues that come up. So the yes and will give you a chance to dig in. So the more someone's ideas are challenged, that sometimes the more they will often dig in on their position, and that will close the door on positive, effective communication. So in this game, the yes and forces people to avoid rejecting others' ideas, and instead you have to find a way to go with the flow. So instead of no but, we're saying yes and to be honest, I use this in a number of relationships, and it really helps keep conversations open and flowing. So all right. And I'm going to hand it back to Christina and Dory to talk about some of, oh, I'm sorry, hold on. The image on this slide is of 4 young Native American young adults wearing black jackets and black pants and wearing ties, and they're walking down a street. Now I will hand it over to Christina and Dory to talk about their experiences in implementing this curriculum.
Christina, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Raina. Well, when we first began, I've been in this project from the beginning. So we wrote the curriculum, and then we're getting to test drive it. We chose one county. We have 15 counties, and Maya Santa Maria, who's our former director, and I sat down and we worked together to choose Whitfield County. We chose that county because when we got to looking, we realized that it had 50% Latinx in the population, and we had not reached out to that population. So what we did was we had to do a little Googling and looking into what resources we had, but we found the Latin Latinx Association that was in Whitfield County, and they actually serve all of our counties once we got to talking with them and realized this resource was available. We met with Ava Rodriguez, who is over the Latinx American Association, and we had lunch with her. And we also, one of our other staff met with a person in the media that was also up in that area. And while we were working to learn the county, I did a interview with the Dalton newspaper. And we really kind of, spread it out on Constant Contact and put it all over social media. And we made sure that it went onto some media that Ava, kind of connected us with. And that's how we kind of got the word out. We chose a date to have a meeting. And as I said, we had this large community room, and we had Jill, who brought our equipment so we could film the staff. With the permission of participants, we had cameras so we could see how this was going. We talked with the group about, we had some what we call ready bags. They are really unique bags that were put together by one of our staff. And we demonstrated those, and we talked about the center, and then we turned the meeting over to the participants and let them talk to us about anything and everything they felt would help their community. And we were surprised to learn that they talked about access to medical care, like when they, not so much to get into the medical office, but people in wheelchairs, wheelchair users who couldn't access by getting into the exam chairs and things like that. And of course, some of the other topics of transportation and everything come up. So it was a success, and I think we learned a lot about the community, and we're going to go back and address some of their issues and challenges, and maybe we can help them get in contact a way to advocate for some of the things they need. And our goal is to hopefully have a spotlight in every county. So I think as success is that, I think the whole event was a success. The challenges is kind of like I said earlier, you can do all the publicity you want and let everybody know about it, but it's out of your control who shows up. But in this case, we did have a really great participation.
Well, I've gotten to use many facets of this curriculum for multiple projects I'm working on. I'm going to talk about one specific area. We live in South Carolina. South Carolina is prone to a lot of emergencies and disasters. So utilizing parts of this curriculum to bring people together for emergency preparedness for individuals with disabilities and access and functional needs was vital. Utilizing knowing your community leaders, that exercise was vital to us being able to do that, because we had to know who to pull together, who to bring in to connect. Then looking at the different disability organizations that exist alongside the Centers for Independent Living that we have in South Carolina, and bringing them together and connecting them with the organizations that serve emergency response traditionally, Emergency Management Division, Red Cross, and FEMA, and so on and so on. Then looking at consumers with a variety of disabilities. They need to have a seat at the table no matter what outreach we're doing for what project, because if they're not having a say in it, then are we really producing quality connections and doing goals and projects that are going to best suit the needs of the individuals we serve? So bringing consumers in with a variety of disabilities. Going into those communities that needed more response, that needed more emergency management, that needed more connectivity to the services that exist. And then doing that by contacting and sitting down and going to those communities with those leaders, those representatives, those church organizations, et cetera, and really evaluating the data that Raina and I mentioned earlier that talks about the people with disabilities that live in those areas. You need to know that to be effective. Then looking at, from there, utilizing aspects of certain segments, even in certain rural communities. I needed to have people that represented those communities doing outreach alongside me. If I'm not a representative of that community, I just, for them, feel like an outsider trying to tell them what to do. So whether that meant bringing my colleagues on my staff that represent that community, whether it meant reaching out to some of my consumers that live in that area, whatever that took is what I did, because I needed to connect with people and on a level where they trusted that connection. And then another aspect of it was pulling people together to form what we call the South Carolina Disabilities and Disasters Partner Coalition, which brings together all of these entities and how vital that is. We couldn't have done that without all of this outreach. We could not have done that without all of these connections. We could not have done that without all of these leaders and individuals with disabilities playing a role in it. Some of the challenges and learning opportunities I've gained along the way. Know before you go. Really, just like Christina mentioned, just cold calling people, it doesn't work as well. And I'm sure you all have had the same experience. Finding a way to connect with what's already there, you know how to make that happen is important. Looking at your sales readiness. Honestly, in some capacities, we were very skilled in certain areas. And then in other areas, we had to build up that capacity. Maybe bringing those leaders in, maybe finding people who are a part of those marginalized communities that I'm not. And really having that voice be a seat at the table is really instrumental. Utilizing interns, utilizing students, utilizing people in the community who want to volunteer and have a lot to contribute. They don't have to be staff members to take initiative and help us get the word out. And then I think the other learning opportunity I would share is this, that I took away from this. Recognize what you don't know. I don't know everything. What I learned along the way is what I could learn. And I took it as an opportunity to learn and grow from other people, whether it was from individuals, BIPOC communities, LGBTQIA+ communities, whether it was people with disabilities in multiple marginalized communities, whether it was community leaders who could give me another reflection to look at, because I had to say to myself, you know, I don't know it all, and it's important for me to be open and embrace everything I can learn. And I think for those of us in our communities, and we all know that's everybody at a SIL, you're doing outreach on some level or aspect within your role. It's important to recognize where we can grow and learn from our communities. And I think that's probably the one thing I would pass along that I feel like I've been able to take away, not only from this amazing project, which I'm so excited it's going to be shared with everyone, but also individually as a person. And Raina, I think it's turning back to you.
hear me.
And before
Um,
we do that, Raina, I was
yeah.
just gonna mention that the picture on the screen is a multi-generation family of Asian culture.
Great. And actually, I think it's still you.
Exciting, woohoo. I'm so excited for Raina to get to share it with you all that I was ready to go there so y'all could learn more about how you can get involved. So what are some key lessons that I learned along the way? Find the resources you need. You know, you have to look within your communities to see the resources you need to be providing comprehensive services. That could be community leaders, that could be organizations, it could be disability organization. And probably the thing we most need to do, non-traditional entities and organizations, because they serve people with disabilities, but we need to have them at the table so that we can work together. And any students, interns, and volunteers. Identify how your center is a resource. Sometimes we think everybody knows this information and they don't. They don't know how we can collaborate with them if they're the housing committee for that county or the transportation coalition. They don't know us as a resource. So we have to jump in there and show them. And then the one other thing I've learned from this project, patience, patience, patience. It can take time to make inways into rural communities because, as most of you mentioned earlier, they are very much neighbor helping neighbor. And so we are seen as an outsider, but if you take some of the strategies we use, if you take patience and you make the right community connections, utilizing your consumers, we can make a real difference and make full access and inclusion take part. And now I think it goes to you.
Thank you, Dory. So the last here is more lessons, and be brave because it always won't be perfect. This is one thing I have to let go of because I always have this idea in my head that I want it to be perfect and that it can never be perfect. But when you're setting these up, you know, you work to go out in the counties and you have an idea of how you want it to go. Sometimes it's not going to go that way. But what I found out, and this is something where what Dory just said about patience, I always want to work perfectly the first time, and it's not. I've had to learn to kind of let go. But what I have learned is what I've always thought of, sometimes I've had things that didn't go the way I wanted, but what I found out is sometimes it leads me to something else. That's something I've had to find out during COVID, especially where our outreach had to change. And sometimes I would find myself doing something and I would think, well, this is not something that's going to work for us. And then I would sit there for a while and I would meet somebody incredible. And eventually we would find a resource and it would just go a whole different direction. So it won't always be perfect, but a lot of times what you think isn't perfect turns out to lead you somewhere else and find a new resource. And I found that's always happened when I was most critical of myself. I found I've run into something that led to a whole different direction, but it was a good direction. Finding common goals, and this is where we had to reach out to the Latinx rural community members because we when we started, we purposely started with Whitfield for that reason, because we were concerned that we weren't reaching that population. And because of that resource that we found in Whitfield, we have found out that they serve every county that we serve. And so that's like finding a diamond that's going to serve us for every county and help us reach populations in all the counties. So that's, just that alone was a priceless resource. Starting where you have some connection would be helpful. We had to kind of make our connection with Whitfield. We have connections in all of our counties, but to reach that population, we had to create a resource for us. And it worked out so that it's going to serve every one of our counties. So even though, there's lessons that we learned, it all turned out for the positive. Thank you.
Great. And this final image of a movie or TV show is two young white adults standing close to each other, looking confused or concerned. One man wearing a black and gray sweater, and the woman is wearing a blue and white polka dot shirt. And so as before we get into what's next and how you all can get involved, because we are looking for more people to participate in this program, we just wanted to open it up and see if there's any questions. And you can either ask to be unmuted, or you can drop that in the chat if you have questions.
And again, there's a Q&A box in your menu bar if you have questions, and then you can also press *9 to raise your hand, or press the raise hand option.
Great. Well, if you think of questions as we talk about what's next. So with this program, we are, like I said, recruiting new CIL staff to be mentored by existing participants, and the RTC rural staff and April staff, Mary Willard, is also involved in this project to increase their capacity and reach in their rural service areas. So maybe you're thinking like this has been a great resource and you want to actually implement some of these activities and have a structure and a connection with other people who are also working on expanding their rural reach, and you think your center is interested in this, and if you want to have a conversation with your executive director, we're happy to provide more information about the program, and we're definitely looking to get started in some new rural areas. So if you're interested, please, you can drop your email in the chat, or feel free to direct message me or us, and we will get in contact. And it looks like Mari already shared some. Excellent. Yeah, and we're going to save the chat, so we'll definitely be in touch. And Jake, wonderful. Well, I don't see any questions. Is there? Okay, so what everyone has been waiting for. How did we do? So on this final slide, so it looked like, I think most everybody got so the first picture of the 7 individuals standing in a field, it was, well, you were right, it was Smallville. Oh, I see a question. Is there a group that meets regularly to discuss strategies of connecting with rural areas? That's a great question. And I know, Sierra, maybe you can help. I know April was holding some monthly rural conversation meetings that was talking about a lot of different things. I'm not sure if that's still going on.
Yeah, so Mary actually facilitates our rural conversations, and that is a monthly group, and I think they're off until January though, and they'll pick back up in January, but they meet monthly to kind of go over and check in with other people across the country on how we're doing outreach, what programs are you running, what barriers are you running against, problem solving together as a group in that peer mentoring, peer support model. So definitely be on the lookout on our website. It will be there as well.
Great. And I attended those that were going on during COVID, and they were really great peer meetings. So then the second photo of the 2 Native American men in front of the wooden building is smoke signals. I think I saw somebody guess that. So I think somebody guessed reservation dogs, which is the photo of the 4 young Native American people in the suits and ties walking down the street. And then the peanut butter falcon was the 2 men, one with a developmental disability sitting in the grass. I think I saw people got that right. And then Minari, somebody, that was one that was new to me when I asked for suggestions. I haven't seen this and I want to, but the multi-generational Asian American family in the grasses. And then the final one was indeed Schitt's Creek, the 2 young adults looking confused and concerned. So that is all we have here. I don't know if Dory or Christina, if you want to add anything, but thank you for having us. And yes, don't forget to do the evaluation, and we're always interested in your feedback.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for presenting this. This is such good information. And thank you, Brittany, for moderating, and to our interpreters and CART.